Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. Sudan faces more uncertainty as military leaders cancel all agreements with the opposition. The opposition says the regime's time is up.
This regime will fall no matter what.
Bad news for South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa as the economy has its worst dip in performance for a decade. We report from southeastern Ghana, where separatists are demanding restoration of Western Togoland as an independent state. Also on the program, the festival of breaking the fast. We join Muslims in Mogadishu as they celebrate the end of the holy month of Ramadan. And in sports, the Confederation of African Football is locked in what the BBC understands is a volatile meeting today following the events that marked the CAF Champions League final on June the 1st. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. This regime will fall no matter what. That's the reaction today from the Sudanese opposition to the announcement by the Transitional Military Council that it was breaking off all contact with the protesters and would cancel all agreements already reached. Well,
learned his lessons from history, it seems. He's reproducing a complete and clear image of history. We believe that the matter is now in the hands of the Sudanese people. The Sudanese people have begun setting up barricades. They've succeeded in their strikes. They're heading towards disobedience. This regime will fall no matter what.
Well, things came to a head on Monday after security operatives opened fire on protesters, killing at least 30 of them. They, the protesters, then said they were calling off talks with the TMC. In its reaction, the TMC has said it has cancelled all previous agreements made with opposition groups and has called for the elections in the next 9 months. Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the leader of the TMC, made the announcement on national television saying the opposition must bear some responsibility for what has happened. Adding, we will end negotiations with the opposition, declaration of freedom and change forces. And we call for general elections within a period of 9 months. Let's speak now to Dr. Hussam Al-Mujamar, who is the Vice President of the Sudan's Doctors Union. They're working very closely with the groups that are calling for protest in the regime change. Now, the opposition leader in Sudan, your country, has said that the TMC is not learning from history. What exactly do you mean by that?
They are not learning from history. Revolution of Sudan is start with, and history of revolution around the world. Obviously, revolution once starts and never finish. The only finish to the revolution, we say, is that the handover of power to the Sudanese people. And I think that's what our aim is going to be, no matter what.
But some people would argue that your aims are a bit far-fetched. You don't have the experience of leading a government, of leading a whole country. How would you want to exclude the military from any agreement that is reached on how Sudan moves forward?
That's not true. We are not totally excluding the military from the agreement. Actually, they have been offered some position within the Supreme Council.
But some would argue that you're not in a position to offer them these positions.
No, we are in the position because we are the one who led the revolution. We are the one who brought the people to the army headquarters. We are the one who are leading the protest. We are the voice of the people. So we are the one who are going to take over and take this country to prosperity and peace.
Well, your stubbornness, as some would call it now, in continuing with these protests has led to the deaths of 30 of your colleagues. I mean, do you take any responsibility at all for these deaths?
I think the responsibility lies on the doorstep of the military council. They are the ones who are under their watch. This has happened. And if it's not sanctioned by them, who sanctioned it.
Dr. Al-Muchema, just stay with us because we've also been speaking to the United Nations. Since the violence on Monday, the international community has been speaking, particularly the United Nations. It has urged the Sudanese authorities to facilitate an independent investigation into the deaths and to hold those responsible accountable. My colleague Sophie Kenya spoke to the UN's Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed and asked just who will carry out these investigations.
That would be for the government to determine, but clearly to do this with the African Union in mind, I think this is important. But they would decide what those independent investigations could be.
But the military is currently in charge, and the people who, committed the atrocities are soldiers. Is it really possible to ask them to investigate themselves, really?
No, you wouldn't ask them to investigate themselves. That's why we bring the African Union and the United Nations into this. I think the good offices will play a good role in determining that. But there are mechanisms for independent investigations within the international community, and we should lean on those. But I think what is important is to continue that engagement and to try to bring people back to where we were the day before yesterday.
Is there more that the United Nations can do, like, say, work with the African Union to look at targeted sanctions if people are found culpable?
Well, this would be a decision for the Security Council if it was to come to that. And as I said, we would be led by the direction that the African Union would take. I mean, the Secretary General has always been very clear that it is their leadership that we support and that we don't take these steps. Of course, we're very worried about the state of human rights, and that for us is an important international obligation that we want to ensure is upheld. So continue to have our voice on that.
Okay, so how do you visualize the process in the coming 9 months?
I don't think about 9 months. I think about right now to get people back to the table and to negotiate a peaceful transition. If I'm thinking about 9 months, I've concluded that there is no a possibility for that to happen. And I think it's really important that we stay with this day by day right now. And that we do call for an end to the violence, and that we try to get people back to the table. Again, as I said, the leadership of the African Union here is critical. This is an issue that they are best positioned to deal with, and I think more people need to be brought on to try to convince the military of the right way to go.
More people, meaning the international, is there a way the international
I would say that even from Africa, even from Africa we have leaders, we have elders, we have one that could mediate in this, and of course the UN stands ready to support that. But we do believe that this has an African solution.
Are you happy with how the African Union has handled things so far?
Would
you do anything different?
Given the circumstances, I absolutely am. I think that this is a complex situation. We've come a long way from where we were a couple of months ago. Expectations are very high because for years there has been an oppression. And so I think that's what we have to deal with, managing the expectations and getting to the right side of history. That's what's important. And I think the leadership of the African Union is doing the best that it can in these circumstances, and we intend to continue to support them.
Are you positive?
I'm very positive.
So, Dr. Al-Muchema, Amina Mohammed there from the UN saying that she's thinking about the now and not 9 months. Obviously, you must be happy with that. But are you happy with the level of support you are getting from the international community and institutions like the UN?
The level of support has been okay, but I think more need to be done. And I think the institutions have to get their act together and stop the killing of the civilian. And this is the most problematic situation we are in now. We want to turn it into a peaceful situation. I agree that an investigation has to be conducted, but it has to be transparent and visible to us. And we need to be included in this investigation. We cannot ask the military council themselves to investigate themselves. I know they have mechanisms, but within those mechanisms we have to have transparency, accountability, and we need to see it.
Okay, some would say that Sudan is now at a crossroads and at a point where each side has to give. What is your side willing to give to move your country forward? I'm
not in the position to ask that question, I'm afraid. I'm not a member of the negotiation committee. What I can say is that we have a demand for freedom, and we hope that our country gets it back on track, and that we get our people their freedom they deserve.
Okay, Dr. Hassan Al-Mujamar, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's go to South Africa now, where it's barely a month since Cyril Ramaphosa won the presidential elections with a campaign in which he promised to improve the economy. Well, it's not good news for him or the country, as statistics released today reveal that the economy shrunk by more than 3% in the first quarter of the year. That's compared to the previous 3 months. It's the worst dip in performance for a decade. Well, the BBC's Milton Nkosi joins us now from our studios in Johannesburg. Milton, this decrease is being blamed in the decrease in output from manufacturing industry and unemployment. They say they are partly to blame for this dip. Am I right?
Yes, partly, Peter. It's mining, manufacturing, and forestry and agriculture. Mining lost about 10.8%, with a huge decrease on the iron ore and coal sectors. The manufacturing dropped by 8.8%, and the agriculture and forestry dropped by 13.2%. Those are the main reasons why we are where we are today, with a 3.2% first quarter of GDP down here in South Africa.
And just how much pressure does that put on a newly elected Cyril Ramaphosa, who has made the improvement of the economy the cornerstone of one of the cornerstones, rather, of his presidency?
That's a very important question, Peter. Cyril Ramaphosa campaigned on growing the economy. He is still hoping that his efforts will yield some results down the line. But remember, part of this problem, the mining, manufacturing, and forestry and agriculture sector, the reason why they decreased was because of the power cuts that South Africa suffered in February and March. The Eskom story is still affecting South Africa. And as a result, tonight, the rand, the currency here, has dropped by 2%. And they've just announced that petrol will increase by 9 cents at midnight. So it doesn't rain, but it pours. And Cyril Ramaphosa is hoping very much that the news from the first quarter will disappear as he marches on with his new cabinet that he announced last week.
And Milton, with this new cabinet in place now, and knowing fully well what the problems are, what's the likelihood that the economy might start to move up so as to avoid another dip next session, and next quarter, and a third dip in succession would bring the country into recession?
Oh, yes. I've just been listening to the statistician general who released the results from Statistics South Africa. He said there's no indication that South Africa might actually technically enter into a recession like it did last year. But there is a good chance that it might get itself out of it if things improve from now on. There is a problem of state-owned entities like the South African Airways. The CEO just resigned over the weekend. And also Eskom, its CEO, also resigned. So Cyril Ramaphosa has got his work cut out for him. But he is hugely hopeful, and South Africans are hopeful because GDP does not measure the confidence and the feelings of the people. South Africans are hopeful after last month's election. So everyone is hoping that this news of the first quarter will definitely tend for the better later in the year.
Milton Nkosi, thank you very much for talking to us there from our studios in Johannesburg. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa now. Supporters of Malawian opposition leader Lazarus Chakwera marched through the streets of the capital Lilongwe today, protesting against alleged irregularities in the 21st of May presidential elections. Protesters chanted slogans claiming President Peter Mutharika had stolen the election. Mr. Mutharika won a second term in office narrowly, defeating his closest challenger, Mr. Chakwera, by just 3%. A Tanzanian mother of a 4-year-old with Down syndrome has written a letter calling for a new word in the Swahili language to describe the condition. Eli Kitali says one of the terms currently used translates to dwarf and is a mistranslation. Kitali believes changing the terminology related to the condition will improve how people with Down syndrome are treated. Hundreds of millions of dollars recovered from the frozen assets of former Nigerian military leader Sani Abacha have been transferred to authorities in Jersey. A representative from the Office of the Island's Attorney General has told the BBC it hadn't yet decided how it would split the money. Mr. Abacha is reported to have stolen billions of dollars from the country during his time in power. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, Algeria talk big ahead of the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations. That's in sports. This is Focus on Africa. The top stories this hour. Hopes of Sudan moving peacefully towards democracy have been shattered in the last 24 hours. The military opened fire on unarmed protesters on Monday, killing at least 30 people. Today, the country's army rulers have cancelled all agreements with the main opposition and called for snap elections within 9 months. South Africa's economy shrunk by more than 3% in the first quarter of the year compared to the previous 3 months. It's the worst dip in performance for a decade. Now, for several decades, groups in southeastern Ghana have been campaigning for the restoration of the so-called Western Togoland as an independent state. This month, the leader of one of the main groups, the Homeland Study Group Foundation, was arrested and is standing trial on treason and other related charges. 80 others were also arrested for attempting to demonstrate against the arrest of their leaders. The BBC's Thomas Nadi reports from southeastern Ghana.
Trying to make their voices heard. These are members of the Homeland Study Group Foundation, a separatist group who are meeting to educate their members about the history of Ghana and why they want Togoland, a territory in western Ghana, to become an independent state. The territory belonged to Germany, but after the First World War, when that government was defeated, Togoland was divided between France and Britain. When Africa was decolonized, the future of the territory needed to be decided. The eastern part became present-day Togo, and residents of the western side voted to merge with Ghana, then called the Gold Coast. But residents say they have since been marginalized by the government and lack proper investment. The campaign groups have been looking through unification documents from the colonial era. They argue the way the country was unified in the 50s wasn't legal.
Why should we be swallowed by another nation when we are told that we are a union? That is the issue. We are not fighting with Ghana. They are friends. They are sisters and they are brothers. After our independence has been consummated, we will now think of whether we would want to have a union. Ghana knows we are not part of them. So they don't spend their resources on us.
The region is very small and the economy is weak. It has no big factories and a poor infrastructure.
Though there's genuine concern about the poor state of development in this part of Ghana, opinions here are divided about the need for an independent country.
Natununu Amati-Fio, a Ghanaian historian, says that one of the main issues that needs to be addressed is how marginalized the territory feels by the government.
There has to be consideration. We have to talk to each other, find out if there are peaceful ways, pacific ways that we can rectify the situation, bring development where development does not exist.
When asked to comment, the government told the BBC that they will continue to treat the actions of separatists as a criminal matter. Thomas Nadi, BBC News, Dabala in southeastern Ghana.
Let's look at some sports now. And the Confederation of African Football has been holding an emergency meeting in Paris following the events that marred the CAF Champions League final on June the 1st. You may remember that the match pit Tunisian side Esperance against Wydad Casablanca. Chaos ensued when the match officials declined to award Wydad a goal and did not also seek the assistance from the VAR to verify their decision. This angered Moroccan football fans and observers who strongly argued that the decision of the referee was unjust. The BBC understands that today's meeting has been volatile and has been postponed to restart in just under an hour. Now, FIFA has lifted Sierra Leone's international ban on Monday following a meeting of the World Governing Bodies Council in Paris. The move comes a week after the Sierra Leone FA president, Aisha Johansson, was cleared of corruption following a long-running court case. FIFA suspended Sierra Leone last October due to third-party interference in the running of the country's FA. In a statement, FIFA said the suspension was lifted after the High Court of Sierra Leone acquitted the SLFA president and her general secretary of all charges last month. Algeria national coach Jamel Belmadi has been talking about his team's chances ahead of this month's Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt. The Desert Foxes fly to Qatar on Thursday as they intensify training. Belmadi's squad will then travel to Egypt on the 18th of June ahead of the tournament, where they will play Kenya, Tanzania and Senegal in Group C. The coach says his team are in it to win it.
Personne nous interdit d'être ambitieux dans la vie de manière générale. Nobody is allowed to stop us from dreaming in this life, and I don't stop myself either. There is no pressure. They are all players of a high level, so we'll transform it into positive pressure. I have, and we have, the ambition to go and win this African Cup.
Cricket now, and South Africa fast bowler Dale Steyn has been ruled out of the ongoing World Cup through injury. The 35-year-old has been battling to overcome a shoulder injury in time for Wednesday's make-or-break clash with India in Southampton. The Proteas have called up left-arm pace bowler Boyron Hendricks as a replacement. And how about this for a catch? A photographer at the Oval made an impressive one-handed catch as South Africa's Faf du Plessis smashed a six to bring up his half-century in the surprise loss to Bangladesh. Ian Kingston from Agence France Presse coolly cut the du Plessis six off the Mossadegh Hossain as it flew into the pavilion end of the Oval. Fantastic. And that's the sports. Now, to end the program, we look at Eid celebrations in Africa. Muslims across the world have started marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. The festival of breaking the fast is a religious holiday when people give thanks to Allah and exchange gifts. Bella Hassan reports from Mogadishu.
A prayer to mark the end of Ramadan across Mogadishu. Thousands have come together for celebrations. Eid al-Fitr, the end of holy month of Ramadan. It's time for family and friends. Bouncy castles, train and roller coaster rides, laughter filling the air. It's magical time for children. Their parents watch. This time, less worried about attacks by militant group Al-Shabaab, which has carried out assaults on Somalia and Mogadishu for years.
We are very happy to be celebrating today with all Muslims around the world in a peaceful atmosphere, and now I am with my children.
Last Eid al-Fitr, most of the streets of Mogadishu was shut down for security reasons. But now it seems that security is getting better and some streets have reopened.
For many, today is a happy and peaceful day. The Eid celebrations roll in 3-day-long public holiday here in Somalia. Bella Shego, BBC, Mogadishu.
And if you notice how big my tummy is today, that's because the BBC Swahili service here at New Broadcasting House prepared a huge spread on the 5th floor where the language services sit and invited everyone who cared to come and feast. So thank you very much. Just before we go, another look at our top story. Sudanese security forces have deployed in large numbers across the capital Khartoum, which is in lockdown a day after at least 30 people were shot dead during an operation to break up a protest site outside army headquarters. That's it from me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the Focus on Africa team. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I am @Okwoche, but for now, that's it from the program. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.